Hello everyone, this is the Mike Siver Show, and I'm speaking again with Dick Overton, who was on our last show about youth, alcohol, and advertising. And just going to recap a little bit. In the last show, Dick, we talked about how the advertisement that's done by the alcohol beverage industry opens the door for young people to start to drink and believe that it's something that it's not, and can get them things that it normally cannot get. And in a way, I can say this, I think, from my point of view, it's almost encouraging young people to drink and get used to it, so when they become adults, they're already hooked on it. And because of the counseling business I do, we deal with a lot of young people from alcohol, drugs and alcohol. And they come in wondering now why they've got a DUI, now they lost their license, why they have this, and why alcohol is against the law anyway when they're going to make marijuana legal. Or they think they're going to make marijuana legal. Yeah. They hope they're going to make marijuana legal.
We need two problems, yeah.
So we have this issue, and it's getting larger. It's not getting smaller. It's getting worse with younger and younger people. And in my business, when we start to talk about the history of the young clients we get, the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, they most of the time started drinking when they were very young, 13, 14, some even younger than that.
Right.
And it's a little scary that they don't have any real understanding of the damage that they can do to themselves and other people under the influence of alcohol.
Right.
And we can spend hours on the show talking about alcohol effects, but this show is you're bringing your history with advertising and alcohol, the issue that you had, and how you dealt with that, and what you're trying to do with it today.
Right.
So I'm going to turn the show back over to you a little while,
Okay.
and listen to what you have to say.
Well, Mike, you're right. Your little recap, in fact, we could go on and on about the statistics where alcohol is present in a situation, be it domestic, be it a date rape in school, car accidents. There is a prominent individual from Michigan State University who is a nationally known expert on this topic that at one time began incorporating in freshman orientation this don't party yourself out of college business, because he sees that as one of the biggest obstacles. So what you're talking about here is the reality of the product, and for a large percentage, not everyone, and that's important to remember, but for a large percentage of people, 10 to 14% or more, which by legal standards, if anything else was that prevalent in a number of situations, there would be constructive legal action to take care of it. You're talking about 10 to 14% of the population that is severely harmed by this, and the statistics are abhorrent. So how is it, and this became the question that started me on my journey, how is it then that all we see is a very fun, harmless, jovial representation of the product? A product that if you picked up a garden variety textbook and looked at the description of alcoholic beverage, or what are the properties of alcohol when consumed, you'd find things like you experience in your practice. You'd find things that are behavior deviant. You'd find things like addictive. You'd find things like impaired motor skills, judgment impairment, death if overconsumed in one sitting. And we find time and time again that what we call binge drinking, and someone was found, often a college student, dead in their bunk, or at spring break, mom and dad get the call about what happened. Just had an example the day of graduation at Notre Dame under the influence of alcohol. Some folks in sort of a rite of passage of seniors climbed one of the buildings, and tragically one of them fell. Notre Dame lost a great football prospect several years ago that, while on spring break his senior year, at a party, fell off a railing 2 stories from a hotel and was killed. So we have the evidence, and we've been documenting it for years. As I said, most policemen can tell you the prevalence of alcohol specifically in their work. As I said last episode of this show, watch a few episodes of Cops and tell me what you think. So how is it that alcohol is advertised completely different, and what's the motivation for it? And that's what I became interested in. For those that hadn't caught the first episode, this all started when I passed through my living room and saw my kids watching an alcoholic beverage ad. By that time in my life, at 30-some years old, I, like everyone else, had personal experience with alcohol, be it my own, witnessing friends who have had relationships fall apart. I personally have lost 12 or 13 people to alcohol-related incidents, 2 suicides under the influence of alcohol. But yet, it's brought to us with Spuds McKenzie and Little Dogs and that type of thing. As an advertising executive mentioned to me many years ago when I was doing research for what I hoped would be a trial on this issue, he said, you have to remember you have a product that has no utility value. It won't wash your clothes, shine your car, do your hair, and in fact has these very negative properties. So you almost have to misrepresent it to get it out, or it wouldn't sell. I asked a question, if the product were invented today and came to the market and went before the Federal Trade Commission, it's sort of like a Bob Newhart routine. So what happens when you drink this? And then, well, you can get wobbly. And is there anything else? And after the litany of hazards come forward, the trade commissions are looking at each other going, holy cow, do we want to license this? And if we do, how will it be represented in the marketplace? And you can imagine the advertising. I always use as a standard a Shentex, which is the product for non-smoking. Very lengthy, detailed disclaimers. But the other part about it is what I learned in my studies preparing for, again, what I hope would be a trial. Advertising itself is very sophisticated, and we know that. Marketing and advertising are also psychological studies in college. You study what motivates people, what trips their trigger, what gets them to go. Alcoholic beverage advertising is no different. There are some people that I've talked to that have alluded to their belief, a personal yet professional belief, that alcoholic beverage industry actually goes after the problem drinker. Statistically, they say that about 50% of the booze drank in this country is consumed by the problem drinker. So the alcoholic beverage industry has no incentive to clean up the drinking habits of America. You're not going to see an advertisement that says, if you're having a problem with our product, we don't need your business. That's not going to happen. One of the gentlemen I talked to about advertising even broke down some commercials to make his point. More recently, there was an ad run by a beer company, we'll say. You'll probably identify it, but it's a young couple, a 20-something young modern couple sitting in an open cafe. And they tell me that every piece of these commercials is not by accident. Every element has a purpose, psychologically. The young lady at the table, you can't tell me today what she was drinking or consuming. The only thing on the table was this beer, this product. But they're sitting in an open cafe, and he's got his little dog on a leash, his pet that he loves very much apparently. So the girlfriend, testing his affection, asks him, if your mother and I were hanging on a cliff and you could only save one of us, who would you save? And of course he says, well, you dear, certainly, no question asked. She goes, okay, what if it was Mike, which is the dog, and you could only save one of us? Sorry, Mike, I love you, but. Then she comes to the last one and she says, what if it was me and your Miller Lite? And he pauses and he says, how high is the cliff? So it's very comical, but you and I both know that one of the things that comes apart first when you develop a drinking problem is personal relationships.
Yep.
There's somebody there close to you that notices it and isn't happy about it. This type of a commercial is designed to reinforce the fact that she doesn't understand you. Let her go, stick with the beer. That's what guys do. That's what real men do. So you've got years of very sophisticated advertising aimed at impressionable minds who, as I mentioned earlier, one fella asked me, if you don't think alcoholic beverage has an impact, the advertising has an impact on young people, how many young people drive illegally versus drink illegally? Because the automobile companies would never be allowed to advertise their products, promising the things that they do, the way alcoholic beverage company does. So you have to go back and look at why there are restrictions in advertising. Advertising laws basically exist for 3 basic purposes. One is they actually acknowledge the power of advertising. When I was in court at the preliminary exam, when we were trying to get to trial, the attorney in defense of Budweiser made an offhand comment. He said, Your Honor, nobody really believes these commercials, So my thoughts were, and I said, so, well, wait a minute, why do you spend millions of dollars on them then if they have no impact and no value? I mean, do you have a brother-in-law that you promised mom you'd keep employed and he works at the ad agency? Of course they have impact, and of course they work. So let's not you take us for fools. So the advertising laws acknowledge the fact that advertising can have an impact on people. So you're not allowed to say and do things that will mislead people. The other two parts of it is that they're there to obviously protect the public. Because if somebody like the old wagon days when the brown bottle come, you know, the wagon, the medicine show comes to town and the guy holds up the brown bottle and promises you the moon, if there's any harmful substances in those or anything he promises isn't going to happen, these people are going to be taken and they're going to be sore about it. In the old days, that gentleman would pack up his wagon and get out of town before anybody found out that there was a problem. I sort of tongue-in-cheek say that the only industry that hasn't been compelled to leave town was the alcoholic beverage industry. They've paid and lobbied their way to stay and keep on going. So it's obviously there to protect consumers from wrongdoing. The second part about it, and this is why very expensive, powerful attorneys showed up in court to counter me. There's a lot of money at stake. A lot of money at stake. So advertising laws are there also to see that companies are not entitled to the revenue they gain by these fraudulent practices. They can be fined, revenues can be returned, that type of thing. So if you've got a body of laws that say, these are things you can't do, and they clearly define what you can't do. You can't represent something. You can't overstate its benefits or its properties. But also you can't omit things that are material. And you get into very specific definitions of what's material. There are tons of court cases and hundreds and thousands of court precedents on product liability that paint a pattern. As I said before, the little things we're not going to get excited about. But the things that you know about, and this is where the assumption of risk doctrine comes in, where they say, you know, if people drink and get in trouble, it's their own darn fault. Everybody knows the problems in alcohol. Yeah. So if you get in trouble drinking, you know, you're an idiot and we're clean and we walk away and we push a button and file our 4 briefs that establish that precedent and away we go. The problem, as I said before with that precedent, is that it is only based on the fact that the provider of the service or the manufacturer of the product has in fact given all the material and all the information to an individual where they can make an informed decision, thereby assuming the risk.
Right.
If most of your audience that you're advertising toward even yet isn't a customer, they are 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders, 18, 19 years old that legally aren't able to drink yet, but that's your future market. And that's where you spend a lot of time impressing them and making impressions on them and painting a picture of what life will be like when our product enters your life. They can't assume the risk. They're not lawfully allowed to assume the risk, and there's none of the information that they need to do that. So the question about companies advertising towards young people is good advertising practice, just like everyone else does. When you have an industry that is allowed to operate like this, what you've got is an enigma, a complete, nothing else parallels it. If you or I brought out a loaf of bread today, grandma's favorite recipe, and it tasted great, but the unique thing about it was in 4 days, it becomes toxic. We couldn't put that somewhere small on the label and then say, if you eat it on the 5th day, it's your own darn fault. It wouldn't work. So products are not immune from that type of thing. I used to tell the story about an automobile that was manufactured, and this draws a great parallel. It became very popular in the country. It was advertised as a part of a very social life. It showed you going all over the country to the greatest places from Grand Canyon. Girls fawned over you as you stopped at the stoplight. But somebody watching this product happened to pick up on something, and that there was a great relationship between some social dysfunction in this car. Wondered why. People that acted strangely, people that came home and got in fights, people that ran off the road, many of the parallels of intoxication, including the behavior deviant properties. And what he discovered was in fact that the revolutionary material that the seats were made out of, that were shiny and durable and soft and pliable, when heated, just sitting in the sunlight, gave off a gas that simulated most of the properties of intoxication.
Wow.
Okay? Imagine if he went to people and discovered this and they said, well, we're not going to do anything about it. This is too big an industry. These people contribute to my campaign. It's been around forever. Nobody's going to believe you. They're just going to have to take their chances. Everybody knows about the car and the problems with it. That would never happen. So what people fall back on, even in the legislative and legal arena, is that this product has been around since biblical times. This product was once banned in this country, and that didn't work out too well. Well, it's important to remember that I'm not talking about prohibition, and I'm not a moralist on it. I don't believe there's any inanimate object in earth, including alcoholic beverages or rocks for that matter, that are inherently evil. But if we have something in our environment, in our social environment, that has this type of history and this type of resume, it would seem that somebody would say, you know, we ought to stop advertising it like candy. There's got to be some cause and effect between people walking into this arena over and over again and then getting into trouble. We spend a fortune on it. I had the occasion to be involved with a young person who had their license taken away when they were in college, and I helped them out a little bit. And I happened to go over to the court one day here at the county building, and there's a side door where these young people have to go in, and they're randomly called in for breathalyzer tests and that type of thing. And what I saw was a long line of people under 20 years old, under 21 years old, who are already in trouble, who have been brought into a culture and society that says this is acceptable, everybody does it.
Yep.
It's glorified in movies. We've heard the phrase, how many times have you heard the phrase, what you need to do is go out and get drunk? You know, something's wrong in your life, you need to go out and get drunk.
Yep.
And Hollywood and the media do as bad a job as anybody in promoting this idea, and yet hiding it. I call it the Elvis syndrome. We didn't find out about all Elvis's troubles until after he was dead, but there were people close to him and even in the media that knew about it. Not too often, not too long does time pass usually do we find another celebrity, be it an athlete, Mel Gibson, somebody that comes up and says they're in trouble with alcohol. Country western star that recently went back to rehab for alcohol. So you have to ask yourself, is it really the individual that's that flawed and that problem, or when you remove this one particular substance from their life, things are okay? Might it be the inherent properties of this product given their physiology? If you wore my glasses all day and got sick to your stomach from, you know, the flawed prescription, you'd want your glasses back. You wouldn't start to find fault with yourself that there's something inherently wrong with you because you can't negotiate the day and everything's blurry and you have headaches. So Hollywood does the same thing, and they hide it. We have been so bombarded with the imagery of alcoholic beverage as a plus, a harmless, attractive plus in our life, that we forgot to remember, we've got to question and remember that it is a for-profit industry. They get to keep the money that they've generated from the sale of their product. It is not a religion. It's not a belief system. It's not the question of abortion. It's not a human life. This is a series and a group of for-profit industries. What's remarkable is, as I said before, in this day and age, despite the fact that they bring their product glamorously to the public, omitting much of the dangers, when things do go bad, in this society where, gosh, we've seen some ludicrous lawsuits, this industry has never paid a dime, not a nickel, in court for any damage it's done. For no misrepresentation, for no entrapment, nothing. I, on the other hand, because I brought this lawsuit, have been the victim of a lot of what I call buffoonery. I even made it to the National Enquirer. A shock jock called me up in the morning and started on me as the guy who sued Budweiser because no matter how much I drank, these pretty girls and these marvelous beach situations didn't come to fruition. And when I asked him where he heard this, he said, "Did you read the National Enquirer?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, maybe I ought to get a copy." The way this lawsuit was capsuled and put out to the media, and you can still find it if you Google Richard Overton and beer lawsuit, is that I sued Anheuser-Busch because no matter how much I drank of their product, the beautiful women in the beach scenes didn't show up. Nothing could be further from the truth. I defy anyone to read the actual complaint that they were served with and see if you can extract from that what is all over the internet about me. There are some people, prominent people, that have recognized this and taken action. Along the way, when I was involved in this, as I said, I touched with many people. When it became known I was doing this, when the initial court hearing was publicized, I got phone calls from all over the country, some very interesting stories. That's what led me to the people in New York City that were actually, the Attorney General was actually taking up this cause on behalf of the state while Michigan was dismissing the cases. One of the things that came to my attention, and I actually called them, you probably remember a gentleman by the name of Bubba Smith. He was an all-American football player from Michigan State, went on to a very successful pro football career, and then was sort of a notable figure in movies, the Police Academy series, but he also was involved in beer advertising. If you remember years ago, there was a series of commercials for Miller Lite that the slogan caught on, "Less filling tastes great." And these very prominently recognizable figures, including Bubba Smith and other athletes, would be in a variety of scenarios, infuting a campsite where they get in an argument over less filling tastes great, that type of thing. Well, about 10, 15 years later, I'm not sure exactly, but in one event, Bubba Smith was invited back to Michigan State University to be honored for his lifetime achievement in sports and movies and that type of thing. And I had heard this story, so I actually called them. I chased them down, and he and his brother were in partnership. His brother was involved in a management, in a promotional, sort of an agent capacity. Toby, who was also a very good athlete. And I talked to Toby on the phone, and it's interesting why I talked to Toby here in a second. And what I learned was that at this reunion or this visit to Michigan State, when Bubba was leaving in a limousine, he passed a long line of college students who were just drunk out of their minds, holding up a beer can, yelling, "Less filling, tastes great," that type of thing. Well, Bubba was disturbed by it, and while still in the limo leaving the place, he turned to his brother Toby and said, "If that's what I'm doing to young people, I'm all done advertising beer." So Toby says, "You have a contract. You know, you're under contract for these folks. You know, you're a part of this promotion, and I don't know that you can just walk away." So, and I'm relating this secondhand, but the essence of his position was he informed his brother to call the folks, whoever they were, the ad agency or whatever, and basically tell them that if they'd allow him to leave, just stop, go, he wouldn't say a word. But if they didn't, he would become a very vocal opponent and advocate for the other side of the argument. Well, he was allowed to leave. And interestingly enough, that's why I wound up talking to Toby when Bubba was actually on the extension listening and said, "Toby, you tell him." True to his word, Bubba kept his word that he would never talk about it, but he let his brother talk about it. So here again, you have little anecdotal pieces where somebody noticed it, and this happened, and another country star or another celebrity's in rehab for alcohol, and still no one's really started to eat the big elephant, which the old joke is, how do you eat elephant piece by piece, one bite at a time. My position is very simply, we have this very large industry out there that, not according to Dick Overton, not his belief system or anything else, but statistically, it prominently enters into so much of our life in a negative way that at least, if you're not going to prohibit the sale, which I'm not a prohibitionist, we ought to look at how it's brought to us. We ought to look at just why are we letting them come out this way and never be compelled by law to bring forth any of the shortcomings, which is law in almost every state. So if you've got a body of laws, if you have a body of laws that clearly spell out what's legal when bringing a product to the marketplace, and in detail define what is omission, what is a material fact, and this is what truth in advertising and marketing laws do. And Michigan has a set of those. I spoke to the gentleman that wrote the current set of advertising laws. And yet you have a judicial system that on the record says we're not going to enforce these laws against this one product. Remember, there's no other I could find out there that enjoys this immunity. We're not going to do that. Then you continue to have the public harmed. Generation after generation, young people misled about this product and get in trouble. And you provide them no relief. And you continue to let the industry operate this way. In legal terms, it kind of smacks of either entrapment or conspiracy to defraud. Now, the tobacco industry, ironically, was the first one to be taken down for this type of thing. And I say ironically because they've been carrying warnings on the package, very graphic, cancer, kill you, don't smoke warning, since 1964 or 5. And yet they were the industry that does it. The only thing the liquor or alcoholic beverage industry is compelled to do now are little things like on the product, say, don't drive, don't operate machinery. This is after you've made a decision to buy the product. Just for fun, I've often asked people about the warning label on alcoholic beverage. There is? Is there? I like the television ads that say great beer, great responsibility. I've asked young people what that means, and I get a variety of things. Very rarely do they say we got to be careful drinking. Many of them have said, well, they're taking pride in their work. They're, being a brewmaster is a craft. So, they have a great responsibility to say they bring you a quality product. They bring you a clear, clean, well fermented Budweiser. In essence, it says, after you've used a product that has a textbook property to reduce your ability to make a sound judgment, please make a sound judgment. So, again, it goes back to the way they're allowed, Mike, to promote the product. Branding is a serious part of it. It's been established that you don't wait until someone's your customer, just like little girls. We teach them about nail polish and hair color long before they're wearing it. It's the same thing with this product. It's not that it's evil advertising, it's good advertising. The problem is that this product has so many dangerously inherent properties that unlike any other should we be doing it. So if you have a legal structure that now goes all the way to the federal government, unlike any other product out there, when it comes to advertising, there is something called the Federal Beverage Labeling Act. And it specifically states that no one can force the industry to put any of these extra things in. The Labeling Act, as they call it, the label is prescribed and set, and the law says that no political entity, state, county, can demand any more of it, can require them to do any more. That's unprecedented. I know we're coming down to the end here in a couple of minutes, but can you think of a product out there, be it automobiles, tires, paint, where such a prohibition is put on the federal level against protecting the consumers in your area that specifically says you are not required to and no one can force you to include the negative side of your product when you bring it to the marketplace? Can you think of another one?
None that I know of.
No. When I talked to Strom Thurmond's office, and ironically, the language that's on beer cans and wine today, we're the only probably, I see we have a minute left, the only place that they're required. I actually wrote some of that. I worked with them back and forth. When they finally decided on what label would be required, and the act was, codified, the people from the industry, the liquor industry, never showed up to hear what the outcome was, what they're going to require. I heard third party that they went out and celebrated because they'd won. They had bought a law that says we can continue to operate the way we have. And as I say, they got the ability to keep farming our young people generation after generation. And we keep picking up the bodies and putting away the damage.
Wow, a lot of information, Dick.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, on our next session, bring in some stuff that I deal with.
Okay.
It's unbelievable the stuff that we have to deal with in the court system and legal system just because of that.
That's right.
So we're going to wind it up now.
Good.
Thank you very much for coming back again.
Appreciate
I really look
that.
forward to next time.
Appreciate the opportunity.
And this is Mike Syver and Dick Overton saying good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.